Hello, everybody. Welcome into this episode of Drilling Deeper. Thanks so much for joining us. Happy first day of Mine Expo 2024. If you're listening to us on your way to the Las Vegas Convention Center or walking the floor of the Las Vegas Convention Center, I am Jack Kopanski, managing editor of Pit and Quarry Magazine. No Kevin Yannick today, running the show solo. Today being the first day of Mine Expo. Very exciting time for those that are going to be in Vegas for that. We'll be there. We'll be at booth 216. Very fitting, obviously being a Cleveland company, that's our booth number. So if you're around the Las Vegas Convention Center, if you're at Mine Expo, come by, say hi. We've got times available for companies that want to come in and do a little booth visit, sit down, talk to us a little bit about what's going on, how the show's going. So feel free to swing by. Before we get into today's episode, though, however, want to give a little shout out to the show sponsor and the sponsor of this episode. Thank you first and foremost to our show sponsor, TCI Manufacturing. Celebrating 25 years of excellence in 2025, TCI Manufacturing embodies the promise of concepts to reality as the industry's leading aggregate resource. TCI specializes in precision-engineered, custom-fabricated steel products, committed to delivering top quality, strength, and precision in every project. Learn more at www.tcimfg.com. Thank you also to the sponsor of this episode, Syntron Material Handling. With more than 140 years of bulk material handling experience, Syntron Material Handling is a recognized industry leader that provides innovative engineering solutions, high-performance products, and superior customer service. Syntron offers solutions in conveying, feeding, screening, elevating, vibratory flow aids, and mining controls of bulk products. For more information, visit syntronmh.com. Thanks so much to TCI and Syntron for sponsoring the show and for sponsoring this episode. We certainly appreciate your partnership and support. Today we're going to dive into a little bit of an economic outlook. We're about 3/4 of the way through the year. We will be 3/4 of the way through the year come the end of September here. So kind of a good point to kind of check in, see how the first 9 months of the year have treated us, what's in store for the last 3 months, and sort of look at what's on the horizon for 2025. So I got the chance to sit down with a few economists that we've worked with before, as well as one new one, to kind of get their thoughts on some of the trends within the industry, what the different construction markets are looking like, what's going on with the workforce. I was lucky enough to be joined by Ken Simonson, chief economist at the Associated General Contractors of America, Richard Branch, chief economist at Dodge Construction Network, and Zack Fritz, COO at Sage Policy Group and an economist with Associated Builders and Contractors, to kind of talk about all things, economics, what's been going on in the construction sectors, sort of what they've been seeing through the first 3/4 of the year, what they expect for the last part of the year, and what they expect for 2025. So this is going to be the first 2 episodes that you'll be hearing from Ken, Richard, and Zach. Today, we're going to be looking at a trio of topics. We're going to be looking at the workforce, inflation and interest rates, and sort of the impact on what inflation and what interest rate changes have been having on the industry and what they're expected to have on the industry the rest of this year and into next year. We're going to start with the workforce. I sort of talked with each of them about, where we stand with sort of the skilled labor issue, as that's obviously been something that's plagued the construction industry for a long time now, really not just the construction industry, but obviously that being the industry we work in, it kind of presents itself a little more than in other industries, but that certainly is something that has been an issue for a lot of different industries over the last year, multiple years, however long you want to look back. So we're going to dive in here. You're going to hear, in order, you're going to hear Ken Simonson, Richard Branch, and then Zack Fritz talk a little bit about the current state of the workforce. They talk about job openings being down. You're going to hear some info from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Job Opening and Labor Turnover Survey. Sort of talk about where we stand with skilled labor. And hear a little bit also about, what's going on with vocational schools and trade programs, where we kind of stand with those and what hopefully the future holds. So without further ado, here is Ken, Richard, and Zach. So, just to kind of get started, I know a lot of what went into at least the start of this report was looking at workforce and how contractors are, looking for workers, maybe not necessarily being able to find as much as they're looking for, having a difficulty filling some open positions. I'm just curious, to what is this difficulty being attributed, and is this something you foresee shifting anytime soon? And maybe what role do you expect technology and automation to play in alleviating these workforce woes?
Sure, good questions. AGC has conducted this survey for 12 years now. We have a total of 28,000 member companies. About two-thirds of those are either general contractors or specialty trade contractors, and the rest are suppliers of equipment, goods, and services. So this is intended to get responses from the contractors about what they're experiencing, what they are doing about it, what they're expecting in the year ahead. And the results have been fairly consistent from year to year, that the vast majority of firms have open positions as of June 30th and have difficulty filling most of those. We asked this year about 18 separate craft positions and 18 salaried positions. And for all of the craft positions, at least 60% of the respondents who had an opening on June 30th said it was difficult to fill. And now, for each of those positions that they had an opening. And for the salaried positions, overall, a lot of difficulty filling them. Not as much as on the crafts, principally because there are a lot of salaried positions that are transferable from one industry to another. But to be a craft worker in construction, you generally need to have experience and maybe credentials in the construction field. So this is a chronic problem. Overall, an even higher percentage than last year said that they were having difficulty filling positions. Specifically, 94% of the firms with openings for craft workers said those positions were hard to fill, and 92% of the firms with salaried positions said that they were hard to fill. And so I do think that it will continue to be a problem. Firms are trying to substitute technology, whether it's autonomous equipment, drones, robots, and other types of more advanced equipment, operating things remotely where possible, so you don't have to have as many on-site workers, or you can substitute equipment for some of the workers that you had on the site. Certainly, other types of technology, software allowing better scheduling, or other kinds of information exchange and processing, maybe reducing the number of salaried workers they need, or at least of office workers, and hopefully speeding up the communications channels when you need a request for information fulfilled or something like that, or just to make sure that you have the right number of workers with the right skills on the job site at the right time. But the industry can't do it itself. We are looking to all levels of government to get the word out to parents and guidance counselors and students that construction offers great starting pay and great advancement opportunities, as well as the chance to show your friends and neighbors that you've put up a cool looking building like the one behind you.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, right? That probably one of the two or three biggest things holding back construction from really expanding much stronger than it is the shortage of skilled workers. From a hiring perspective, though, we're averaging about 20,000 new construction jobs each month this year. That's pretty much on par with where we were in 2023. A little bit slower than where we were in 2022. So hiring remains pretty robust, clearly showing that the demand for workers remains strong. Kind of a counter piece of data is also reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that's the number of job openings. And the number of job openings in construction has been falling. It's around 250,000 open jobs, down from a peak of around 400,000 open jobs a few months ago. To be honest, I'm not sure if I want to kind of sink into that data too much or put too much stock in that data. It's pretty volatile. I've read some reports that survey responses that feed that data might be underperforming. Survey response rates might be lower, and it just seems to run counter to just about everything anecdotally that we're hearing in the sector, right? So I think the concern that, as I think about it with hiring, is if hiring remains robust now and construction starts in 2024 are trundling along, they're growing slightly. What's going to happen if and when the Fed shifts policy and it starts to stimulate construction? And the concern there is that that's when we'll start to see a real ceiling develop in construction, that there's only so much work we can get done with the number of workers that we have. So this will continue to be a hindrance for activity over the next several years. To end maybe on a positive note in this discussion, there's been lots of reports. There's a great article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times about a month or so ago, about increasing enrollments in trade schools, right? So that trade-off between going to a college or university and going to trade schools, it seems like trade school enrollment is rising. So I think that's good news down the road, right? It takes time for those folks to get through their training and then do apprenticeships and whatnot. So maybe this is the start of a new trend that maybe is more like a 2026, 2027 thing that we can think about. So good news there maybe down the road, but I think at least over the short term, I think labor will continue to be an issue.
Yeah, so it's gotten better. It's definitely gotten better recently. One of our best sources of data on this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics Job Opening and Labor Turnover Survey, JOLTS for short. That showed a pretty sharp decrease in job openings for the construction industry. At the same time, the construction unemployment rate currently stands at 3.2%, which, matches the quarter century low. So there's not a lot of labor out there, but demand for labor has subsided a little. I think especially on the residential side, we're still not seeing, workers quitting their jobs very much. And the, contractors are still laying off workers at a pretty low rate. So I'd say getting better, but far from good. And then I think it's especially still an issue at certain skilled occupations.
Yeah.
Also worth noting that it's certainly worse in some markets than others. I think specifically the markets where you see a lot of these mega projects going on, labor is a little bit tighter there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was recently talking with someone else, and they had kind of mentioned that they're seeing sort of or I can't remember if they said they were seeing an increase or were maybe expecting an increase in participation in trade and vocational schools, kind of hoping to build up more of that skilled labor. Is that something you're seeing or hearing about as well? Or what do you maybe think needs to be done to kind of help start getting the ball rolling on increasing that skilled labor pool?
Yeah, so that, that's a big step. I'm mostly looking at this on at a very macro level. Mm-hmm. So you're probably talking to people on the ground more than I am. That's certainly a necessary step, especially with these, skilled occupations, apprenticeship programs, training programs, all of that. The other side of it, is our demographic dynamics are just not supporting the workforce in any industry right now. Construction has, a higher foreign-born percentage than I think any other. If not, it's towards the top. So immigration, is certainly a high priority. That's maybe less so for the skilled occupations where we see these, really sharp shortages. I think getting people into the apprenticeship programs and the skilled training programs is critical. I'd love to hear that it's working. I know ABC has a handful of initiatives that are good. That's what has to happen. That's what needed to happen a decade ago, I think.
Right.
But it's never too late, I think.
Next thing I talked about with Ken, Richard, and Zach was sort of looking at what's been going on with inflation and interest rates. When we spoke in early September, the interest rate had just come down to 2.9%. And then I think just a day or two later, maybe even between the time I talked with Ken and Zach, the first and last interview I did, it came down to about 2.5%. And as we are recording today, Wednesday, September 18th, the Federal Reserve is expected to drop interest rates. The general consensus is about 25 basis points, about 25%. Nothing official yet, as I believe that's coming at about 2 p.m., and we are currently recording at about 12:30. So, that's something that will likely have happened after this is recorded and as you're listening to this. But I got a chance to sort of talk with them what they expect from the Fed, what has been happening with inflation. They touched a little bit on what mortgage rates have been doing as well, how federal fund rates and how inflation has been impacting residential construction, and just sort of the residential sector in general, with people with a big demand for homes. What that's kind of looking like. They'll get into a little bit more in that in our second episode. But, also just kind of pick their brains about, are we out of the woods yet? Is this the sign that things are kind of right-siding? And I think the general consensus was that, I don't know if we're out of the woods yet, but it definitely is a good start and trending in the right direction. So let's hear from Ken, Richard, and Zach on inflation and the current state of interest rates.
Moving over to inflation here for a couple questions, looking at how the inflation rates have gone since since 21, 22, when they kind of spiked around there, sort of slowly but steadily declined over the last few years. I think I saw we're at about 2.9%, if that's correct. And the anticipation is that federal interest rates are going to be coming down in the middle of this month when the Fed announces that. Obviously, both some good signs. How much do you expect, or does the general economic community expect the rate to come down in this month? And is this maybe a sign that we're sort of getting out of the woods, or is there still a ways to go?
Well, I can cheerfully admit that I have never been good at predicting what the Federal Open Market Committee would do in terms of setting short-term rates, nor in making investment decisions myself based on short or long-term interest rates. But it seems a safe bet as of, 12:05 p.m. on Thursday, that when the Federal Open Market Committee meets in a little less than 2 weeks, that yes, they will cut rates. The Feding now, will it be a quarter point or half a point? That's literally the overnight rate that banks charge each other. Now, that's important to developers. It certainly influences the bank lending rate to private developers for short-term money. For the housing market, certainly depends more on the 30-year fixed mortgage rate, which in turn reflects what's going on with the longer 10-year Treasury note rate. And I see just a couple minutes ago, Freddie Mac said that the 30-year fixed mortgage rate was unchanged from last week at 6.35%. That's a heck of a lot better than it was 9 or 12 months ago. 12 months ago, they said it averaged 7.12%. So it's already come down by 3/4 of a percentage point. And that will enable more people to qualify for a mortgage, and hopefully will pry some more people out of the current 3% mortgage and be willing to buy a home at 6.25% or 6.5%, or do without a mortgage. It'll make it easier for home builders to buy down the rate to which home buyers would qualify. So all of those things, I think, are positive for single-family home construction. Now, we've had periods where people left rental housing, went into buying a single-family home. But right now, we're so far behind the curve in the amount of housing needed that I think we will see first more single-family, later more multifamily. Right now, we're at a point where so many apartments are hitting the market that even hot markets like Austin are suddenly finding they can't fill up the buildings fast enough, and rents are coming down. And I think that's likely to hold back new multifamily construction for at least another year. So I think it'll be 2026 before multifamily picks up, but I think single family, we will see at least gradual improvement from here on out.
Regarding the interest rate cut that's expected later this month, you mentioned probably between a quarter or a half a percentage point is kind of the, like you said, sort of the betting line right now. What is the anticipation for sort of maybe December or looking at a 25? Is this sort of expected or hoped to be the first of several cuts coming down the line? Is this kind of a we'll cut it here, wait and see what happens over the next few months and go from there? Where does that kind of stand?
I guess there are two schools of thought, as always in economics. You have at least two, but at the beginning of this year, many market analysts and economists were saying, oh, the Fed's going to start cutting in March. They're going to cut every meeting, and we'll wind up with 7 cuts or some large number. Now, of course, there aren't that many meetings left, but there's still a fair number of people who expect them to cut by at least 3/4 of a percentage point, 75 basis points between now and the end of the year, maybe a full basis point, and to continue cutting until the rate comes down to maybe 3.5, maybe even less, sometime in 2025. My own view, and it's colored by what I think they ought to do, I don't pretend to know what's in their heads, is be data-driven, as they constantly tell us. Wait until you see each report on employment and on inflation. We haven't seen sustained 2% inflation, which they say is their goal. We haven't seen the job market soften to the point that we're not adding jobs. We added 114,000 in the preliminary estimate for July. That could turn out to be revised up or down. So I'd like them to look at those two reports, the employment report tomorrow morning, the CPI, and the producer price index reports that come out next week, before they decide on any cut. But it certainly, statements from Chair Powell and some of the bank presidents seem like they're determined to cut at least a 1/4 point now. But I think they aren't going to signal further cuts until they've seen more data.
I think the broad consensus is you're spot on. The Fed's going to go in September. I think it's 25 basis points. I think most folks think it's 25. There was talk maybe before the employment report earlier in the month that it could have been 50 basis points, but that was a really decent labor number earlier in the month. So it shows that the economy is really bending, not cracking. So 25 basis points is safe. I do think they go in December with another 25 basis points, and I think they potentially will continue to cut throughout the course of 2025. Our forecast right now has a 25 basis point rate cut in each quarter throughout 2025. So the other question is we're out of the woods, and I think part of the reason why I feel these rate cuts are going to be slow and methodical is that when you look at inflation, and they use the core PCE, which is around 2.6, 2.7, so it's still above their 2% target. And so they really don't want to be overly aggressive, right, with rate cuts and fear restoking inflation. And nor is the labor market collapsing and cracking. So there's no need to quickly cut rates. So I think they're going to be very slow and methodical throughout the course of 2025. But between now and the end of next year, we're looking at about 150 basis points lower in interest rates, and that's pretty significant.
Yeah, so we're locked in for a rate cut. All signs point towards 25 basis points. This week's consumer price index report was fine by all means, but firm enough that, I think we're pretty much locked in for 25 basis points, and I think it'll be unanimous. They'll keep cutting rates going forward. Who knows? Something can always pop up, some giant supply chain issue that affects prices and, puts a little more upward pressure on inflation. The way things stand right now, I don't want to say we're out of the woods. It could be a little tough to get all the way back down to 2%. But we're most of the way there. We're in the last mile. It might be a bit of a slog. And I think we actually will, that 2.5%, I think we'll see bounce a little bit in the coming months just due to base effects. But for the most part, we're in a pretty good situation with inflation, and I think the Fed will keep cutting rates over their next several meetings.
All right, finally, for this episode at least, talked with the three economists about what the impact of lowering inflation, lowering interest rates, and even when inflation was still higher earlier this year. I know interest rates have kind of stagnated a little bit, right around 5.25%, 5.5% for federal funds. Just kind of talked about the impact on the construction industry, where the impacts kind of currently are, where it might be the rest of this year and going into 25 as interest rates hopefully continue to come down, as inflation continues to come down. Certainly not going to be an overnight fix, but definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. Talked about how, with inflation still being up, until recently, with interest rates being up, construction material prices, what those look like. Some of the guys sort of went sector by sector, looking at how it impacted non-residential and residential specifically. And then also just, sort of confidence that, again, like they sort of touched on with the second question we talked about, confidence that things are going to improve, confidence not only among economists, but also among contractors and producers alike that they work with on kind of on a regular basis. So, one last time today, let's hear from Ken, Richard, and Zach.
You kind of went into how, at least specifically for the housing market, the mortgage rates, the 30-year mortgage rates are impacting sort of the multi and single family subsectors, and how that's been kind of working. I'm curious, how has the sort of slow but steady drop of inflation and the sort of steadiness of the interest rates now, with obviously at least one drop coming up, how have you seen that affect the construction industry over the last year? And do you anticipate that this lowering inflation and, lowered interest rates, at least this quarter, hopefully more moving forward, will affect the industry the rest of this year and into next year?
Well, single family housing has its own drivers. So, builders, they need to get some short-term money, but their customers, they're looking for that 30-year fixed rate. When you look at income-producing properties, whether it's apartments or warehouses, retail, office buildings, and hotels, all of those. The developers are borrowing short-term, and they're looking for rents to cover whatever that cost of construction and of financing is. So they've been hit most of all in the warehouse and office side, as well as apartments, with higher vacancy rates, falling demand, and at the same time, higher interest costs and tighter lending standards that they have to put more equity in order to even get a loan. So that's a pretty toxic combination, and it's going to take more than a quarter or a half percentage point cut in that short-term rate before that equilibrium comes back, and they say these projects are going to pencil out. So I think no matter what the Fed does in the next 1 or 2 or 3 meetings, we're going to see continued declines in the number of multifamily apartment or warehouse and office starts. I think retail, it's going to be very spotty. That to the extent retail is tied to people sitting in offices and going out for lunch or shopping, those downtown markets, they're going to continue to deteriorate. But to the extent that people like me are now working from home some days and might be able to run out and do something in the neighborhood, local retail should be okay. And that's what we've really seen for a while now, is that retail, it is very spotty. On net, it's declining, but not nearly as drastically as office or warehouse.
Yeah, if you think about the trifecta of things negatively impacting the construction sector right now, it's labor, which we talked about. Material prices remain pretty dear, and then it's high rates, right? So high rates have certainly been restricting activity through the course of this year. As I look at the planning data, so again, we're tracking projects all the way through planning to start, and our leading indicator of construction activity, the Dodge Momentum Index, tracks those planning projects when they're non-residential planning projects. And what we're seeing, I think, is pretty interesting, right? Because when you look at the DMI over the past couple of months, maybe 6 months, it's been pretty stable. Over the last couple of months, though, it's pretty aggressively increased. So to me, that shows that developers and owners have a reasonably high sense of confidence here that the conditions for construction will improve. And the way I think about this is like a funnel, right? So all these projects are coming in the top of the funnel, but very few of them are coming out the bottom. So what's going to start to open up that spigot? Well, I think it's lower rates, but I do think uh, we need to be mindful of the fact that one rate cut in September isn't going to open up the floodgates on construction, right? It's going to take successive interest rate cuts over the next several quarters to really start ramping up here. So for us, that's really, I think, probably by late Q1 into early Q2 next year is when we'll start to see the real impact, particularly in non-resi. Residential construction, I would offer that if you look at the current 30-year fixed, right, it's down around 6.4, 6.5. They've already priced in the rate cut. So I think that residential boost might be a little bit sooner than the non-resi.
Yeah, so actually, construction materials prices have been very tame this year. Actually, according to today's PPI release, they're actually down year over year, which is great news. They're still up 40% since the start of the pandemic. That's a good deal faster than overall inflation. So, materials are still expensive, but it's kind of baked in. We're not seeing these increases anymore. And I think that's good. The industry needs that, especially with borrowing costs so elevated. How have interest rates affected the construction industry? It's an obvious headwind.
Mhm.
They always talk about long and variable lags, which is another way of saying we're not quite sure how long it takes for them to impact the industry. But it certainly has. Some of that has kind of been hidden when you take a more holistic view because of all this momentum in data centers and manufacturing mega projects. It certainly hurt private construction volumes. It's not clear how quickly they'll rebound as rates come down. We've seen on the residential side, I think people thought that rates falling down to the low sixes would cause a real uptick in home buying. We haven't quite seen that yet. So on the non-residential side, it'll certainly help to have lower borrowing costs, looser lending standards. But it could be a little while before we see that effect show up in the construction spending data.
All right, thanks so much to Ken Simonson, Richard Branch, and Zack Fritz for joining me. This episode you're gonna be listening to this hopefully when it drops on September 24th. In 2 weeks' time, we will have a MineExpo recap episode where you'll be hearing from some people at our booth how things are going with the show, sort of what they're seeing, what they're doing with technology and equipment that's on display at the show. And then 2 weeks from then, so in about a month's time, you'll be hearing part 2 of my conversation with Ken, Richard, and Zach. And there we're going to dive into the construction market, see what's going on, sort of get into the nitty gritty with infrastructure, non-residential, residential. A lot of good stuff from them there. They kind of give a very detailed look at what sort of subsets of each sector are going to be doing the rest of this year, going into next year. A lot of good info, so you're definitely going to want to tune in for that episode. Additionally, keep an eye out for a fuller story in the October edition of Pit and Quarry. I kind of condensed some of the best thoughts from Ken, Richard, and Zach into a story in our Road to Prosperity section, and you'll be able to find that in our October edition, which should be coming out within the next week or so after you're listening to this episode. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, this episode is going to be going live the first day of MineExpo. Just another reminder, if you are at MineExpo or if you're planning to be at MineExpo any of the 3 days, come say hey. Come check out the Pit and Quarry booth. We're at booth 216. Stop by, say hey, see what's going on. We'd love to chat with you, hear how the show's been treating you, hear what's going on. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, and obviously as you've heard throughout this whole episode, Kevin is not here, but I feel I would be remiss if I didn't take Kevin's role of mentioning the Pit and Quarry Roundtable coming up early next year in late January. You can find more information about that at pitandquarryroundtable.com. It's going to be at the Wigwam in Phoenix. Always a great time. Producers are invited. We're always looking for manufacturers and dealers to partner with as well. So definitely check it out, pitandquarryroundtable.com. This will be my 4th one, and the first 3 have been just incredible experiences, eye-opening hearing from everyone that's involved in the roundtable. It's a good time as well. We get out, get to hear from a bunch of speakers as well. So, that'll be a good time. It will be interesting though. In the past, we've had Michael Johnson with NSSGA deliver a presentation sort of on the state of the industry, what's going on in Washington. As of recording about a week ago, maybe earlier this week, it was announced that he was going to be stepping down as president and CEO of the National Stone, Sand, and Gravel Association. We want to wish Mike the best. Obviously, he's been a huge supporter and partner of Pit and Quarry. So hopefully, nothing but the best to him as he pursues new opportunities in his career. Michelle Stanley currently filling in that role. She's the chief affairs officer there at National Stone, Sand, and Gravel Association. She'll be there in an interim role, and they will be putting together a search to find a permanent president and CEO. His last day on October 11th coming up. So just once again, best wishes to Mike. Thank you very much for all that you've done in partnering and working with Pit and Quarry, and really all you've done for the industry over Mike's 11 years. I've only been around for 3 of them, but over Mike's 11 years, people can't say enough about the good this guy's done. In Pit and Quarry October, you can also find Kevin's column in which he talked to several industry members, including Ward and I with Martin Marietta, to kind of get their thoughts on what Mike has meant to the industry, what he's done over his last 11 years, and just an absolutely glowing review of Mike's time with the association. So once again, Mike, thank you. You will be missed, and best of luck in all your future endeavors. As always, if there's anything that you want to hear more of, hear less of, hear different of, shoot us an email. I am at jkopanski@northcoastmedia.net. Kevin can be found at kyanik@northcoastmedia.net. Those emails will both be in the description of this episode. You can find that. Let us know what you want to hear. We're always interested in hearing from you guys. Obviously, we do this, we enjoy doing it, but we do it for you. We do it for the readers. We do it for the listeners. So if there's anything that you want to hear more or less of, let us know, and we're happy to take it under consideration. Before we go, I want to give one more thank you to TCI Manufacturing for sponsoring the show. Thank you to TCI Manufacturing for sponsoring this show. Celebrating 25 years of excellence in 2025, TCI Manufacturing embodies the promise of concepts to reality as the industry's leading aggregate resource. TCI specializes in precision-engineered, custom-fabricated steel products committed to delivering top quality, strength, and precision in every project. Learn more at tcimfg.com. Thank you once again to TCI for being our show sponsor. We appreciate it very, very much. That's about it. That's all I got for you folks. It's weird doing a solo episode. Normally have Kevin running the show, and I'm just kind of here giving the color commentary. I'm not the play-by-play man often, but kind of fun stepping into this role. But Kevin, looking forward to you being back, buddy. So with that being said, I am Jack Kopanski with Pit and Quarry. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Drilling Deeper. We'll see you next time.